The Temptation of St. Anthony. Restorer of lost things, you resisted drowning. Turn from your reflection and Lisbon's rivers, look west past the castle of St. George, waiting like a pup on the doorstep of God for the sun to set the sky on fire. In and out of love with everything, you held yourself tight from the appearance of spoilage. 17, impervious and water-ready, you sailed for Coimbra. The streets of Alfalma fell away a dropped net. You skimmed cold avenues and leaned into holes in the ground, yearning to be burned at the stake or pierced by lions. You were an ark, and the world was bankrupt. How we imagine you were tempted: an elephant trampling in tempera by the sea, a fish, gondola, or cloven hoof and gold leaf near a castle's ruins, a bare breast hanging like an open eye in the dark. I wonder, Fernando, surrounded by so much silence, might the mind whirl itself into oblivion? Might you have failed, lover of the cross, dragging yourself above the flat horizon, needed forgiveness, sinking, then rising toward heaven? What is poetry for me? And how do I discover, unravel, and arrange the poems I write? For me, poetry is always at least three things: research, responsive and artful play, and a vehicle for connection. When I say poetry begins as research, I mean that to write a poem about St. Anthony, I read his sermons, biography, explore the streets of Portugal, listen to the longing and melancholy in the music, study the catalog of visual artists and festivals that honor him. I collect data. Then I play and respond to the delicate threads and shards I've gathered. When I consider this almost deity and his enduring echo, what frail kernel of his humanity do I want to hold aloft? What sweet words have I been savoring into which I can set this jewel? And of course, connection. The poem is always the beginning of a conversation about who I am, about who we are, an offering to honor our brokenness and beauty. The Q&A after the reading is always the main point, not the afterword. My tendency toward connection in poetry as response has inspired a collection of poems written in response to visual art and the Southern galleries where the art lives. Khalida Ral's exhibition, Away with the Tides, is my current obsession. I'll talk in the time I have left about my process of research and some of the ways I respond to her paintings. I'll show you some of them and end with some snippets of poems that come from this section of my collection. This painting and the next one you will see are both of a man who lives in Overtown, a neighborhood in Miami, Florida. If you haven't heard of Overtown, it's the place that rappers talk about. It's the place that TripAdvisor reminds you not to go. The first thing I noticed looking at the paintings was all the blue. It was inescapable, a haunting. This echoes Imani Perry's work, Black and Blues, how the history of a color tells the story of my people. So I researched the color: indigo dyeing in Africa, indigo dyeing by enslaved craftspeople in the colonies in the US, the legacy of blue. I listened to Rawls talk about pushing and pulling the light out of the water, how she does this with her paintbrush, how she talks about it like something sacred, talks about Virginia Key Beach, the only beach where Black people could go, so close to his home that he could almost see it, but had never been. When I think about all the ways the water has carried us here and there, all of the ways that her work touches back to the past. It's a continued inspiration. And I continue gathering. And as I do that, my son is with me, so he is also caught up in the landscape of my poems. Here are a few of the bits I've written so far. This photo is an outlook of Biscayne Bay in Miami, right outside of the museum. In Overtown, machine arms hover above enormous piles of gravel in the hushed velvet shadow of the highway. This is the other side of everything, where nothing moves but the silent, swooping birds. Later, my son will leap from one concrete bench to the next, looking for red-headed lizards. Later, I'll write a love poem about this place. I'll imagine that Overtown is just one art museum away from being renamed, just like Wynwood. It'll be Midtown Heights. There'll be a little side gallery with Rodin. And that same little picture of a boy pinching a diamond can be compared to something that everybody knows is beautiful. See, just a few miles from Little Haiti, the blue is rising, startling outside, intense, delightful. So much blue, it must be paradise. Call it paradise. Let's think of a new name. Call it Florida Blue. Thank you.